I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, more demands from migrants locally, plus an Eatonville middle school teacher talks about his students' bill that would push for pledge education in public schools.
All along the way, they have learned all the nuances of what it takes to do this. It's not easy. It takes work and commitment.
Also, Amazon is accused of censoring books on COVID-19 at the behest of the White House. We'll discuss that and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. We go back to our old theme of if you give a mouse a cookie. We've said that most of the ridiculousness that happens in Seattle can be compared to the children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. We've seen that with activists in Seattle for a long time. I mean, they start by asking for one thing, and then they want this, and then they want to tax Amazon, and then they want to get rid of jobs, and then they want to take over our streets, and then they want to defund the police, and then they want you to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, and if you don't, then they're going to block the freeways, and it never ends. If you give a mouse a cookie, if you give these activists a cookie, they're going to want a glass of milk, and so on and so forth. And I think that's also what we're seeing play out right now with the migrant crisis and with illegal immigration. And there is a difference between migrants who are here, who have potentially legal asylum claims, and individuals who came into this country illegally, and they hope that the cover of all the other people doing it too would mean that they get to stay in this country indefinitely because their court cases are going to be 5 years from now. So while, there is, I think it's a good thing, there's some bipartisan discussions in Congress about what to do about this absolute disaster. Not that everyone agrees with the bill that's come together. Meanwhile, you have cities across the nation, some of them, frankly, deservedly so, that are bearing the brunt of the migrant crisis. Later on, we're going to hear the bizarre statement from the mayor of Chicago. We already know what's been happening in New York. As you know, Seattle is a sanctuary city. Washington is a sanctuary state. And it should come as a surprise to no one that you have a lot of migrants who come here for that reason, because they've had family or friends who've been able to come here, who've been catered to, in a sense. I mean, we just talked on the show yesterday about how $400 million in taxpayer funds went to illegal immigrants during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then they know that they're not going to be deported. I mean, they could break the law. We've had instances of a guy who was in the country illegally, who raped someone, and when he was released from jail, that ICE wasn't even notified, and he went back and attacked that same person again, and then he fled the country. And so, this isn't necessarily, if I was an illegal migrant who didn't want to play by the rules, Washington State's probably on my list of top states that I would go to live in. So what are we seeing now with you give a mouse a cookie? What do they want next? So you have migrants, some of whom don't have documentation currently, who are bold enough, brave enough because of our laws to show up at City Hall and demand that our government, with our taxpayer funds, help them stay here and help them to be more comfortable when they stay here. We already said that, they showed up at City Hall and the mayor's office was like, oh, well, we'll help, pay for your hotels for a little while. Well, the mayor's office has now agreed to even more, to 3 weeks of extended hotel stays for these migrants who showed up at City Hall. This is from our friend Jonathan Cho. Migrants at the Quality Inn located in Kent told me this evening that the city of Seattle has just agreed to pay for another 3 weeks of extended hotel stays. This will be funded by taxpayer dollars. A spokesperson with the mayor's office just confirmed this. And there are some other outlets reporting on this as well. So they got some initial help from the city of Seattle, to get housing, for instance, until their asylum claims are heard, which, by the way, some people are getting asylum claim hearings for 2027. So you're telling me that you're going to put them up, that you're going to pay for their housing when we already have a bunch of homeless on the streets, record numbers? You're going to pay for their housing until what, 2027? Or some totally undetermined period of time in the future with taxpayer funds, and we're all supposed to be completely okay with this? We already have a system that is overburdened with quote unquote unhoused people that you haven't even shown that you can help them. And now we're just, endless printing press of money. This stuff is absurd. And when you give in, by the way, when you do this and say, yeah, we're going to now extend this like 3 weeks is really going to be it. Like 3 weeks is really going to be as far as, and then they're what, going to kick the migrants out of the hotel they paid for them for 3 weeks? Of course not. They're not going to do that. And then what is next? And when you do that, it just says to more people who cross the border illegally, come to Washington, come to Seattle, go to a city council meeting, tell them that you want help, and they're going to give it to you. And I mean, so it's like this idea of if you build it, they will come. And at what point do you have mayors like Bruce Harrell who say, no, we just talked, didn't he just put us on a hiring freeze because of, which is crazy because you would think that Seattle has enough money to operate. Just put the city on a hiring freeze, yet you're going to come out of pocket for people who are in this country illegally. And I understand that, wow, you don't want to take the political licks from the left by just saying no, but at some point somebody's got to say no, right? Who's it going to be? Is it going to be the governor or the mayor over in New York? Is it going to be the mayor of Chicago? Is it going to be the mayor of Seattle? Who's going to say no? Because if you don't say no, I will tell you pretty quickly, it's going to be an incredibly untenable situation. Now, speaking of, if you give a mouse a cookie, down at the Federal Detention Center in SeaTac. So this is an interesting place because it's where you have people who are awaiting deportation in some instances, who are awaiting hearings. Let's say they came into the country illegally. They wound up there, because ICE somehow, despite all the blocking and assistance from any other law enforcement agency in Washington state, or they do something, ICE finds out about it. They end up at the Federal Detention Center in SeaTac, which I've toured, by the way. I've been there. It looks like a federal prison, but it is privately run, which is also kind of an interesting aspect of this that has been controversial in the past. But what's happening right now at the Federal Detention Center in SeaTac? They're having a hunger strike. They're having a hunger strike because they are demanding that they get quicker asylum hearings. And so you have these immigrants at the detention center. According to this grassroots organization, La Resistencia, 19 immigrants are on strike, saying they have been detained at the Northwest Detention Center facility in Tacoma for more than 2 months with no progress made on resolving their cases. And this is the second hunger strike that they've gone on so far. One striker told La Resistencia, which I don't even know if that's a reliable news source. Something about the name tells me probably not. Quote, "We know that ICE only shows up when we choose not to eat, and they only promise but do not deliver. We have been here for more than 2 months. We want freedom. We ask to continue with our courts and cases, but outside in freedom." Oh, shock. You want to come into the country illegally, and then you're going to go on a hunger strike because you want to await your court date in freedom? Something tells me you probably won't come back for that court date. I'm just spitballing here. But I think you're probably not going to come back to court for that court date, especially if you know that whatever claim that you're going to make to stay in the country isn't legitimate and it's not in line with the law. Now, if you're actually waiting for an asylum hearing that you believe you have a legitimate case to, yeah, I would tend to think that if you were fleeing a situation that was so bad that you believe you can get asylum in the United States, that you are probably just fine staying put there until that case is heard, and that maybe you would come back. But I mean, what are they going to do? What do you do to end a hunger strike? I mean, to me, you just put the food there, and if they eat it, they eat it. Like, you can't force feed them. But are they going to continue the hunger strike until they get their way and they get out of this detention center? I don't know what it is. But at some point, I don't know who it's going to be. When do you say no? Is it $340 million in federal COVID funds going to undocumented immigrants while business owners' livelihoods crumble? Apparently that wasn't it. Apparently that's not when we say no. Is it in New York State where you kick kids from a predominantly black community out of their community center so that it can house undocumented immigrants? Is that when you say no? Apparently that's not when you say no. Is it where you this was in New York as well. I think the last one was in maybe New Hampshire. This one is in New York. Is it where you close a school that taxpayers pay for with their money so their kids can go to school there? Is it where you close a school and force kids to work or to learn from home so you can house undocumented immigrants? Is that when you finally put your foot down? Apparently not. I don't know what it's going to take. And it's so wrapped up in ideology that we've completely lost track of common sense. Just because you're opposed to an overwhelming gifting of public funds to people who come into this country illegally doesn't mean you hate immigrants. Doesn't make you a bigot. Just because you're a parent who, wants your kid to be able to go to school in the building that your tax money pays for doesn't mean you hate immigrants. It doesn't make you a bigot. Just because the community center that your taxes pay for is the only place your kid has to go after school because you're working and you're a single mom and you're not okay with it closing down to house immigrants does not mean you hate immigrants. It doesn't make you a bigot. And I go back to what I've said from the beginning, and this is the cover. If progressives and Democrats need a cover to be able to put their foot down without people telling them that they hate immigrants, the cover is that this is hurting legal immigrants and it's hurting people with legitimate asylum claims. When it is a free-for-all, your ability to actually assist those people who have a documentation to be here, who have a reason to be here, who are fleeing dangerous, deadly, horrible situations, when you give money to everyone who comes across, the money you have available for them is less. The services you have available for them is less. And that is truly what we should all be concerned about, left, right, and center. But this whole, if you give a mouse a cookie approach, I don't know where you think it's going to end, because there is no end to it. There is no end to it. And it's time that someone have a political backbone and not care about their political repercussions 2, 3, 4 years from now. And cut this off before it gets even worse. All right, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about that coming up in national, because the mayor of Chicago had the weirdest comment on what's happening there. I'm very baffled by it, and I'm sure you will be too. I wanted to play for you a clip from Sundays with Subscribers this week because it was such an entertaining interview. I got so many emails from you guys saying you just loved it. It was on fishing and hunting, and this feeling from fishing and hunting enthusiasts that the commission that regulates fishing and hunting is increasingly at odds with them. It's full of a bunch of PETA lovers who think that hunting is the worst thing in the world, and they just want to get to a place where you can't hunt and you can't fish and all of that. So we were joined on Sundays with Subscribers by Tom Nelson, and he's the host of the Outdoor Line on 710 Seattle Sports Saturday mornings. Really entertaining guy. We talked about hunting, but we also talked about fishing and what's going on with this debate between people who want to breach the Snake River dams to improve the salmon population and people who say we can't do that. That would be devastating to a lot of other industries along the river. What I thought is interesting about Tom Nelson's take is it was not what I expected. So he's an avid fisherman, but he's also very conservative. I mean, this guy does not agree with virtually anything that Governor Jay Inslee wants to do. But he is very open to the idea of breaching the Snake River dams. He says, he wants to know how much it would cost. He wants to balance it against the pros and the cons, and he wants us to make up our minds. And if we're not going to do it, just stop freaking talking about it. But he offered an interesting perspective about when it comes to salmon populations, why he believes it could be beneficial.
Representative Simpson's plan addresses these issues quite completely, but it's a spend. It's a really, really large spend. But when you remove these 4 dams on the Snake, you return the Snake River, that stretch of the Snake River, to a free-flowing stretch, not unlike the Hanford Reach on the Columbia, which is currently the largest point source of wild Chinook, and not just Chinook, but large wild Chinook. Yeah. Large wild Chinook in particular are very, very important because they're a preferred prey item for the southern resident killer whales, but also these larger fish are more more effective from a reproductive standpoint. In the Columbia in particular, these larger fish, and I'm talking 30, 40, 50-pound Chinook, right, have the big tails to move the substrate or the rocks to make very resistant nests that are not subject to disturbances by fluctuating water flows, right? And so now if you have a second Hanford Reach in the Columbia system, we are addressing a lot of ESA concerns. We are driving more salmonids without hatchery expenditures. So this may be a big spend right now, Brandi, but the savings from this will echo through generations. Washington has spent billions on extinction of the salmon. And again, we've not seen any kind of meaningful increase in the wild stocks in my lifetime. And certainly we keep losing habitat, so we're going to keep on losing wild fish. The reason hatchery fish are so different is there's critical phases in a salmonid's life. And one of them is fertilization and the next one is hatching. And so whereas in a wild nest, a salmon may fertilize 50, 60% of the eggs. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a buck and a hen exuding their reproductive structures in the river, and some of those eggs don't get fertilized and they don't get deposited in the nest and they float on down the stream. And indeed, that's part of nature's plan, because that's a tremendous food source for other species, right? In the hatchery environment, we can fertilize 90% of those eggs. That's a huge gain. We can hatch 90% of those eggs. So we get these fish past these critical phases. And so our spawner recruit model, in other words, the number of spawners versus the number of fish we can bring back, is higher in the hatchery environment. Problem with the hatchery environment is, again, going back to this genetic symphony of diversity that we spoke about, you keep breeding the same fish that come back in the same hatchery in the same time. And so you get truncated run timing, you get similar sized fish, right? You get a bunch of cousins coming to the party. Let's go. Where's the keg? Here we go. Hey, cousin Sue, you're looking kind of cute tonight.
Gosh. So Tom, it was a very entertaining way to learn about the issues around fishing and hunting in our state. Oh, Tom Nelson. If you want to watch that full interview, it's up at undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. And again, I don't think he's saying, let's do it today, let's breach the Snake River dams, because typically conservatives don't tend to believe that. But what he's saying is, if all you were looking at is, will that help improve the salmon population? The answer, in his estimation, is, of course, yes, it will. But he also understands that there's a lot of other things at play, from hydroelectric power to irrigation to what's happening out in farmlands in eastern Washington. And so it's about balancing those two things and stop, drawing this issue out indefinitely. I mean, how long has the conversation been going on about, should we breach the Snake River dams? I mean, hell, there was a congressional field hearing that happened in eastern Washington over this. And it's like, okay, if you're not going to do it, then let's move on and talk about other things and focus our attention and our energy on other ways that we can improve the salmon population that doesn't have the negative and financial consequences of breaching the dams. And he was referencing this plan from a congressman in Idaho talking about what you could do. And so at the beginning, that's the plan that he was referencing there. Okay, so undividedpod.com if you want to watch that full thing. It was on Sundays with subscribers. Okay, coming up next, we're going to have our interview with Mr. Alex Hansen, who's an Eatonville middle school teacher who we love. He is awesome. And he actually helped his kids craft a bill that they went to Olympia to testify about that would mandate that in our public schools, where they say the Pledge of Allegiance, that you have to also explain to kids the history of the Pledge of Allegiance and what the Pledge of Allegiance means, so that they have a better understanding of it. So he's going to join us and talk about this whole process that these students went through in Olympia to get the bill into committee and where it is right now. But first, the Fed did not drop interest rates last week. You might recall we've talked about it on the show a little bit. And, there's some thought, okay, maybe they'll do it in March or later in the spring. But our friend Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital, he's not even sure if they're going to be willing to do that. Everything has a calculation right now, specifically in an election year. And he says that he doesn't know if that calculation that led them not to drop interest rates last week is really going to change much.
They played it too soft. Financial conditions loosened. Stock markets went up. And we said, okay, we think that's going to result in hotter data economically in the first quarter of this year. That's exactly what we've seen, which that hotter data takes being able to cut out of his hands. And so now he's not going to be able to cut in March, which means rates are going to stay higher for longer. And you're just looking at these guys going, can somebody please be an adult in the bloody room, rip the Band-Aid off, and let's get on with it? But they just won't do it. It just extend and pretend.
Yeah, extend and pretend. I like that. Extend and pretend. So if you're interested in learning more from Zach Abraham, one, he has his weekly radio show, knowyourriskradio.com. I'd encourage you to check it out. But with everything going on, the election, global unrest, rising cost of living, unforeseen market fluctuations, also take the time to schedule time with him to do a free Know Your Risk portfolio review. You only have one retirement. You have to be managing your risk, especially in this environment. Do not leave it up to chance. Zach is the Chief Investment Officer at Bulwark Capital. capital. Their Know Your Risk portfolio review. It's a great way just to see, are you overexposed to risk? Gosh, especially if you're nearing retirement, there is no excuse not to be actively managing your risk. So whether you become a client or not, I promise that you'll leave that risk portfolio review much more informed about the risk to your retirement. So you can schedule it, knowyourriskradio.com, knowyourriskradio.com. Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All right, we want to take you down to Eatonville Middle School into the class of Mr. Alex Hansen. So we played some testimony on the show last week that was sent to us by a few people who said, have you seen this? So there's a bill right now being considered in Olympia that would mandate that public schools teach kids the meaning behind the Pledge of Allegiance. Gosh, if you're going to expect that they stand up and say it at the beginning of school every day, you might as well tell them what it means, which I think is a great idea. And it turns out most states in the union already have something like that. So they're not just standing up there regurgitating something. They have no idea what it means. So here's a little bit of the testimony from these Eatonville Middle School 8th graders.
Assemblies, but every morning when we say at the beginning of each day. Does this bother you? Well, it bothers me, but it's not entirely their fault because they were never taught the meaning and history of the pledge. And I think that is what is leading to the disrespect. The law as is currently written is incomplete. Why do we have to recite the Pledge of Allegiance if we don't know what it means? What I'm getting to is students disrespect the pledge because they do not know what they're pledging for. They do not know the meaning and history of the Pledge of Allegiance if they are required to say it at school.
There is a problem we face every day in schools, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance without the appreciation it deserves. Every American should value the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Those are core documents to the founding of America, and the law requires they be taught to public schools. They state our country's biggest hopes and ideals, but do we make students say them every day? No. However, we do require the pledge to be recited. Why? Because the Pledge of Allegiance is the heart and soul of those documents, of what our founding fathers established, and of our country's most important principles.
I had no actual idea what the Pledge of Allegiance meant at all. We have a law that states public schools must have appropriate flag exercises held in each classroom at the beginning of the school day at the opening of all school assemblies. My first thought when I saw this law was, why do we have a law that requires us to say something that most people don't comprehend? If students are required to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, they should have a proper education in regards to its meaning. That seems logical enough, right?
Albert Einstein once said, "Insanity is trying something over and over again, expecting a different result." Without teaching the meaning of our daily ritual known as the Pledge of Allegiance, it is insane to expect kids to automatically understand it. And how can you expect students to respect and embrace something they don't understand? You see, most children do not respect the pledge. They often horse around or make up different words for the pledge while reciting it. For example, the other day my friend kept repeating the word ravioli instead of the actual pledge words. I was annoyed.
I would be annoyed too. So after we saw that testimony, I tasked Nicole. I said, you got to find this teacher. We did. His name is Alex Hansen. He even sent us some pictures of him and his students down in Olympia when they went. They got a tour of the Capitol. They met the lawmaker who is backing their bill, who sponsored it. And of course, that ended with their committee hearing. So Mr. Hansen was nice enough to join us on unDivided to talk about how this all came to be. And also, we're going to end the interview with a question that I think I owed teachers everywhere, because we've been really harsh on teachers on this show. And I think Mr. Hansen is such a phenomenal example of what a teacher should be. And so I was really curious what he thinks his job is as an educator in the state of Washington. So Mr. Hansen. Mr. Hansen, welcome to unDivided.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I said, well, should we call him Alex? Or no, let's call him Mr. Hansen. It just fits in. So I love this. I kind of joked on my show. I'm actually opposed to the idea of like having kids say the Pledge of Allegiance. Is a little bit of my libertarian tendencies where it's like, is that indoctrination? But I love the idea of making them or helping them to get informed about what it is and then making that informed decision about doing it. So how did this come about?
I got back from France on a Sunday evening. Monday morning, it's a welcome back day at the school. Principal comes up to me and says, "Hey, Alex, hope you're okay with this, but had to make an executive decision while you're gone. You're going to be teaching this new class, Global Perspectives. The curriculum comes out of Cambridge University. It's meant to challenge the high cap kids. So we had been doing high cap, highly capable kids at the middle school by pulling them out every other Wednesday and doing enrichment. He said the school board wants it every day, and they want them challenged academically, wants them to have student voice, engage them, project-based, all that stuff. And I'm thinking while he's telling me this, okay, this is how you get a teacher to retire. You give them something they're not prepared for and say, you got to make up your own curriculum. But really, I was excited, and I told him that. And so I said, the very, very first day, I said, I have an idea already. I'll let you know about it. And very early, maybe even the first day, had my kids recite the pledge. And now they had already done it in the morning, but this is sixth period. It's the end of the day. I had them stand up. I just wanted to observe them, see how they do it, what they sound like. And it was what I thought, what I had observed all these years. There's not a whole lot of passion here. And I wondered if they knew what it meant. And so I had them sit down, had them write the pledge out. They struggled with that because they've been saying it rote all these years by memorization, never thinking about the words. And I said, okay, now that you got that done, don't worry about spelling. They couldn't spell allegiance. Not one of them got that word right. And then I said, okay, underline any word in the pledge that you don't think that you could teach and explain in simple terms to a third grader. They said, okay. They underlined maybe one or two words. And I thought, all right, yeah, sure. You know what a republic is. You know what you're saying, invisible, indivisible, individual. What are you saying and why? So I challenged them. Okay, I gave them 9 words. And I said, now let's see if you can really tell me what these words mean. And they couldn't. They admitted, man, I don't know what these words really mean. I thought I did. So I said, okay, cool. Do you want to know? And they said, yeah. We looked at not just the words, we looked at the history behind it. They were surprised. Wow, it was written back in 1892. It's been changed 4 times. And why? And then we looked at the law. And, you know, these are bright kids, so they're going, Hanson, they require us to say this thing. But we've never known what it meant. What are they doing? Why are they having us do this? And it's sort of like you were saying, Brandi, it is kind of indoctrination if they don't know what it means.
Yes. I love this because it teaches critical thinking and it also teaches independent thought. So we're just going to teach you the facts about this and you decide how you feel about it, right? So how does it get from this lesson in your one class to these students in front of a committee in the legislature testifying?
The next step was, okay, are we done? And they said, no, the law needs to be changed.
I love that so much.
I said, okay, you got to write your representative. So I showed them the website and said, you need to find out who your representatives are, find out what their emails are. You need to write an email. And then we waited. This was back in November. And we waited. And now we're coming up nigh upon the Christmas break, and we have heard from 2 of the legislative aides of the representatives, hadn't yet heard from Senator McCune's office. So my kids are annoyed. I said, how do you feel you heard from the aides? And they said, well, Mr. Hanson, it's not how it works. We saw that I'm just a bill video thing.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yep.
That's not how it works. You're supposed to write your congressman. Your congressman is supposed to say, I agree, write it up. We haven't heard from our representatives. They said, okay, what do? Write them back. So we did. And then they started hearing, and it was a different layer, and it was better, but we still heard from the aide, not from the actual rep. So we're about ready to go on Christmas break. They're annoyed. I'm a little bit annoyed. My principal's a little annoyed. And so I decided to sort of prime the pump.
Yeah.
So I wrote them and said, hey, you know, my kids really were hoping that they would hear from you. It's not the same as hearing from your aide. And I actually called the legislative aide for Senator McCune his Jim McCune, by the way, not Drew. And he said, my bad. That's my fault. It didn't get to the senator's desk yet. And so he called him up that day, and all of a sudden McCune is all over it. And he wants to have a meeting with my kids as soon as we get back from Christmas break. And he wants to ask them about their idea, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world. And that's how it got into a committee hearing.
Well, I love that. And, I complain sometimes on the show about, teachers pushing like activism on kids, but this is every step of the way, you letting them dictate what they wanted to do. And how do we problem solve this? What do we do? And what do we do next? And I love also, the lessons they learned about being consistent and persistent, following up, and this isn't right. And I just think that's great. And so, you guys took a little field trip to Olympia when this thing got a committee hearing. I imagine none of the kids had ever experienced anything like that before.
They were mesmerized by, of course, the awesomeness of that building. So yeah, we did the tour thing. I did it. This is kind of a passion of mine, this history thing and politicking thing. So I knew the building. And then, of course, we got to meet the senator and his aide. He got us onto the Senate floor for some pictures. So it was amazing. And then, of course, the highlight is the committee hearing itself, and my kids giving a speech before adults and getting adults to hear them and go, yeah.
Makes sense.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
It's a good idea. And man, they didn't seem nervous at all. I mean, I was watching one of them, and I forget his name, but he's very engaged and looking up and looking at his paper and making his points. And I just thought, did you practice with them what they were going to say?
Yes. All along the way, they have learned all the nuances of what it takes to do this. It's not easy. It takes work and commitment, perseverance. And so they had to practice. And at first they thought that like most kids, like they could write a speech, turn it in, it gets graded, and you move on. But I said, no, this is real. You're not going to convince adults if you go in there unprepared with a speech that isn't well written and well argued and also well delivered. I warned them, you might get asked some questions, and I don't want you to draw a blank face. I want you to be prepared. You've learned a lot. I mean, what you're delivering is the tip of the iceberg, but you know a whole lot under the surface. And so be ready for that. And lo and behold, the Senator Wellman asked a question and said, do you guys realize that the pledge that I said when I was a kid isn't the same pledge you say today? Do you know what I'm talking about? My kids knew exactly what she was talking about. She said, it's changed. And she said, can you tell me about the change? And one of my kids said, well, which change do you want?
That had to have made you proud.
Yeah, it did. And then I was going, okay, do they understand what she's getting at? And they did. That was the under God thing. And so she said, do you know what's the latest change? And you should watch the hearing to get that student so articulately express that change and why it's important and why it's not an imposition of religion on people just because it references God.
When I grew up, we said the Pledge of Allegiance, and we didn't say this entire Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance has been changed since it was. Did you discover when it was changed and why? Who would like to tell me about it?
Which change are you talking about?
So tell me which change you remember or which change you want to speak to.
There was never an under God. That was the most recent change out of the four. And it doesn't stand for a God as in a religion. It stands for rights that you were given by your creator and that nobody can take away.
And so they found out I got amended. My kid said it needs to be taught in the elementary school at a very basic level. This is what it means. So kids know right out the gate, third grade, they decided, not kindergarten, this is the pledge, this is what it means. Middle school, go deeper, teach the history and all those, the law and all those other things. You can choose not to do it. What does it mean to remain in respectful silence? What does that look like? What does that sound like? You can do that in middle school. Kids will get that. And then high school, you take on, is it even constitutional? Is it indoctrination? What about the under God thing? And my kids all came up with that on their own. I didn't feed them that. So guess what they thought yesterday when they heard that that language was taken out of the bill? For simplicity's sake, Senator Wellman felt, let's just make it required and let school districts decide how they're going to do this, when they're going to do it.
Yeah.
My kids said, automatically, they said, it isn't going to get taught till high school. And I said, oh, right. So what's the problem with that? And they said, well, the whole reason we did this is because we observe it being done disrespectfully. And it's done disrespectfully because kids don't know what it means. It's not going to change that, Mr. Hansen. So we debated today, what should we do? Should we express our concern and try to get it amended back again in rules or on the floor? Or should we let it get through the process and then maybe try to amend it in the House, or get the original language back and then it has to be concurred? And we talked about the calendar. If we do that in a short session, your bill may die. It doesn't get it done. So maybe you need to learn compromise is democracy, and you got to live with what you got. And they had a great discussion today, and we haven't decided. We need majority support. Right now, it's only minority support. It's sponsored by a Republican, 2 co-sponsors are Republican, and Brandi, the danger, okay, in this political world that we're in right now, is it'll be perceived as a MAGA effort by some rogue, weirdo teacher out in Eatonville. Come on, for crying out loud.
From your mouth to God's ears. So has that happened yet?
Not that I know of, but we're staying positive, but we are concerned, and so we're trying to go. We actually asked Senator McCune if he could reach across the aisle and get a co-sponsor from the other party, and then we're golden. Mm-hmm. But I'm getting my kiddos. I have kids that have parents who are on both sides, and so they're rallying. They are aware of that issue, and we're rallying Democratic support. And for now, I think it looks good.
Okay.
And we'll see.
Well, if you pull it off, I might have a few bills I want your class to propose on my behalf next session, a few anti-tax measures, maybe along those lines. So if you could just gear up for that request. Mr. Hansen, let's end with this. I have been critical at points about the state of our education system, where test scores are at, and some choices to teach some things and not others to our kids. But for you, it's which is why I love this. I mean, we get to highlight really wonderful work. I mean, as a teacher, you should be really proud, and critical thinking, like I said, independent thought, which is such a good life skill for anyone. Let's end with this. What do you see your job being as a teacher?
All right. I thought that I actually hoped for this kind of a question, because I want you to know why I became a teacher. It was not what I grew up thinking I was going to do. I was going to be an airline pilot. And that's what I did. I got my private when I was an 18-year-old, and then went off to Big Bend Community College and got my commercial license. And then I ended up with a disease that makes it I'm unable to pass the medical that you need to be an airline pilot. So I had to switch gears. And I have to tell you, for a while, I was pretty depressed and just aimlessly professional student taking whatever. But I was also the ASB president, and I was talking to some classmates about the election. That was back in 1980. And I said, so you're going to vote? And they said, I'm not even registered. I said, well, are you kidding? This is America. No taxation without representation. Having a say is the most important right, and you're throwing it away. How could you throw your vote away? How could you not be registered to vote? This is America. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, man, and then they would say, well, I said, why? Why do you have that feeling? Well, history is boring. My voice, my one vote doesn't make a difference. All those things you've heard. And I decided right then and there, ding, light comes on. That's what I'm going to do when I grow up. I'm going to be a teacher and I'm going to change that. No kid is going to say, I was bored in Mr. Hansen's class, that it was irrelevant, that it didn't mean anything. And by the way, Brandi, reality, I've had kids do that. Yeah, I didn't revolutionize the world, but I came to this job with that passion, and that's what drives me. And that's why this is so exciting, this thing that my kids are, they're not going to forget this. And if they and their parents go to the polls and they vote, I don't care how they vote. I'm not here to indoctrinate them. I'm not here to tell them how to think, and I don't do that in my classroom. But I just want them to exercise their say. And if that is what happens, well, that's why I became a teacher. And I think these kids are all going to do that.
I love that. And the greatest thing that could happen is 20 years from now, one of those kids is teaching someone younger than them about how important their voice is and exercising that, and it continues down the line. Mr. Hansen, you're awesome. I appreciate you talking to us. I love this. I'll be watching eagerly to see what happens and if you can get some bipartisan support for this and what the kids' reactions are if it passes. Are they going to name it the Mr. Alex Hansen Class Act?
No. This is called the Teach the Meaning of the Pledge Bill, or something very close to that. We call it the Pledge Bill for short. And this is about the kids. This is not about me. I don't want to be grandstanding here. Thank you for having me on my show, but I almost wish that the kids were here.
Yeah.
So you could hear them. But yeah, you had to have this story first, I guess. And when we get to the governor's desk, when we see the governor sign this thing, that's going to be a glorious day.
Glorious day indeed. I love that guy. I love it. I saw somebody in the comments say we need 2,000 teachers just like him. And I could not agree more, because it's not about, oh, we need this, we need the kids, him saying you should be taught the meaning. It's about asking them questions. Okay, do you think that makes sense? What do you want to do about it? Where do you want to go from here? So there's a couple important lessons that I think these kids learned that would be great for any kid to learn. Critical thinking, as he and I discussed, problem solving, and also public speaking. You know how scary it is to get in front of I testified in front of a committee this session. I talk for a living, and I was still like, it's got to be 2 minutes, and what do I do? And here you have these middle schoolers who did it with such ease. And so some wonderful lessons. And I just think that Mr. Hansen is such a good example of how to not only teach kids, information, but how to help them absorb that information and make up their own mind about things and problem solve. And I just think that critical thinking is really what's lacking. So should we help these kids? It kind of bums me out that there's no Democrats who want to co-sponsor this bill.
I know.
Which I have half a mind to
like,
who do we, you know what? Senator Mullet, you know how I'm upset with him for supporting 5599? Maybe I should have live called him on the show today and be like, hey, I'm upset with you about that bill. You can make up for it by putting your name on this bill. Isn't he on the Education Committee? I feel like he is. Senator, the kids, don't you care about the kids? They can help him out a little bit. But also, there is a legislative hotline, and this is what Mr. Hansen asked. They don't like the way that the bill was amended, because there is this concern that, okay, when you leave it up to schools how to teach it, they'll just wait till high school, then you'll have kids that go through elementary and middle school never really understanding the pledge. And the kids had this whole plan where it's like, let's teach it this way in elementary and then this way in middle school and then the big picture things in high school. So if you would like to, encourage your lawmakers to support this bill. Maybe your representative or your senator is a Democrat and you want to talk to them about this bill or encourage them to sign on to it and just try to get this thing out of the Rules Committee before it dies there. Call the legislative hotline, 1-800-562-6000, 1-800-562-6000. Get directed to the office that represents you. Leave them a message. Send them emails. Go online. Find out who your representative and your lawmaker or your state senator are, and email them. The kids did it. The 8th graders did it. That's how this all started for them. So you can do it too if you think that this is a good idea. Or if you don't think it's a good idea, send an email and say that as well. Like Mr. Hansen said, I don't care what they do. I don't care how they think, but I just want them to think about it. So same applies to you. Now, I know that Mr. Hansen and his class are going to watch this segment, which is why I kept my opinion out of it predominantly. Mr. Hansen, this is the good time where you should turn it off.
No.
No, because I have something to say that I don't want kids to hear.
You really don't want them to hear it?
Yes.
Or are you just...
I don't need middle schoolers in school getting my opinion on what I'm about to share.
But maybe they need to know what other opinions are out there, and that's
No.
okay.
No, because I wouldn't want them playing some podcast from some left-wing lunatic who, turn it off, Mr. Hansen, turn it off. Here's what bothers me about this. All the dumb stuff we teach kids in school. How many things have we gone through? Like the crazy sex ed lessons and all of this that Democrats are totally behind. The insane DEI, gender ideology, wacko stuff that Democrats are fully in support of. And this is the educational bit that this Democrat on the committee is like, no, we have to alter that. We have to change that. We got to put some rules on there so schools don't feel like they have to teach this a certain way. And then you can't even get a Democratic co-sponsor on this. All the other crap that they're shoving down kids' throats and teaching the meaning behind the Pledge of Allegiance is like where they're going to be like, oh, hands off. We don't want to tell schools what to do.
I mean, this is pointing out a good thing, or this is making a good point, that anything that's perceived as American is labeled MAGA, and we can't support it. So if there's a flag, if there's a pledge, if there's anything, it must be racist because that's our history is racist. And so we can't support anything that has America.
And that really is what it is. And
it
even,
is.
I don't even know what Mr. Hansen's politics are. I could not tell you. But he even acknowledged that, you know, there's no Democrat co-sponsors and maybe this is going to get pegged as some like mega crazy Eatonville teacher or whatever it is. That's exactly what it is, Nicole.
Yep.
It's exactly what it is. It has to do with America and patriotism or whatever. I mean, they are putting up pride flags. They have Pride Month at schools. This week is BLM week at schools. You don't think that there's some BLM flags and that they're teaching them about the movement and how racist white people are and the history of this country? And then your like line in the sand is going to be teaching kids about the Pledge of Allegiance. I agree that absent that information for kids, it is indoctrination. Because it is, the reason I have an issue with the pledge in schools in general.
Or you did. Didn't he talk you out of that?
No. Is I don't like the idea of just standing there and reciting like your commitment to the government and to the flag and as an institution. And I understand there's more history to it than that. But if you have the education behind it where you can learn and decide for yourself, okay, based on the knowledge I got about this, is this something I want to participate in? Because kids do have a choice to participate or not participate. But I think it goes back to let them think critically and independently about it and then let them do it if they want to do it. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't stand up when the pledge is recited at events and
would you say that about
enthusiasm.
The national anthem as well?
I mean, yes. If it's kids, if it's feeling compelled to do it, if it's feeling compelled to do it, I do feel that way.
But you're not arrested or you're not punished if you don't.
Right.
It's not, we're
but
not North
Korea.
Korea.
But I think there is this feeling of like, I'm being compelled to do something I don't understand the meaning behind. I don't know what it is. It's supposed to be about like love of country, you know, dedication to country, loyalty and all this stuff.
But the information is not being taken from you or like kept from you. You can research on your own. I agree. Kids don't do that. Right. And that's why they have this bill. But I disagree because I think that is what's missing in schools and community right now is a sense of community and a sense of we're all here with the same rights and freedoms and we all have the same mission to live the American dream, and that just kind of unifies us. And if you just keep taking away church and the
church
pledge,
has no place in school, but yes,
no,
continue.
And from community. No,
yes.
I didn't mean from schools.
Nicole's in there just
but
taking her Bible into
these
schools.
Are all the things that gave people a sense of community, and we're stripping all the sense of community away and saying, and now we're grouping people. Like, I mean, we're back to you're BIPOC, and so you're separate from this group, and you're separate, from that sexuality, and that's all we're doing is tearing people out of their sense of community and groups and families and things like that. And I think that this is something everybody could be like, I'm an American and I support this.
I think
it's not a hard thing to support freedom.
I want every American to come to patriotism naturally. I want them, I'm a patriot. I love this country. I love everything about it. I love everything about what our founding fathers did and the steps they put in place to help us build a more perfect union. I love it. I came to that place very organically. It wasn't like a sense of, oh, I feel like I have to be a patriot. I feel like I have to. My dad was very anti-government. My dad loved the Constitution. I've said many times it was the first word he taught me to spell, which was a little indoctrination-y. Like my dad's like, I remember him reciting CONSTITUTION and like having me repeat it.
The word indoctrination, I think that's a parent
it's
teaching you how they
feeling,
believe.
Right. It's putting something in someone's mind because you want them to appreciate that. I think a parent can. Yeah. My dad's views on the government were pretty extreme.
Right.
And I do think, I think a lot of them were correct,
yeah.
But I think to teach a little kid that, where I clearly didn't grasp the meaning of Constitution, it was like it was being drilled into my head. I do now, and I appreciate it now, but I think I came to that organically, and I think that's what he wants of these kids. He wants them to come to, wow, this is deep shit, deep stuff on the show today. He wants them to come to that love and appreciation for the Pledge of Allegiance on their own if they choose to, based on being informed about it.
Right.
And I think that's what I want. I want every American to come to have a sense of patriotism that grows out of their experience in this country and in this wonderful place of ours.
So I agree. I want that as well. However, what I think that when pledges were put into schools, it was to encourage that lesson, to say, hey, we all know this. It's obviously been there for a while. And so that was when patriotism was, we were at wars. We were at, there was more inspiration for kids to know those things and to say, like, I need to stand for this country because, my grandpa's at war, or my dad's at war, my brother's at war, or I'm at war, or whatever. You needed that knowledge in that. But now we don't have war at this point in our country. And we have kids being brought up without that. That's just history to them.
Yeah.
And I think that you're supposed to have this education and knowledge behind it, but that's just been lost. And I like that they're trying to bring it back.
This would resurrect it. Yeah. And not actively teaching kids to hate things that make this country great. Teaching kids to be against, not necessarily anti-war. Being anti-war is fine. I think everyone should be anti-war, right? Nobody should be cheering us into wars. But that translating to disrespect for people who serve this country in the military, that is a leap that I think kids are being encouraged to take. Disrespect for law enforcement and for people who put their lives on the line for this country. There's this active effort to get them to disrespect the people who stand up for our freedoms and who fight for our freedoms and who protect us. And that is concerning. And that's why you need something like this more than ever, is like, hey, these kids are being freaking brainwashed into hating this country. Like, let's at least give them the facts and the information they need to make a decision about how they truly feel about this country. So maybe we think the same way. We're just calling it different things.
Well, and we're both going opposite. You're just saying take it out before, and I'm saying leave it in and teach, just like these kids want, which I appreciate.
Undivided. See, I feel like we got there. I love it.
I think the kids could have listened to that.
Just not the gender ideology rant, although I would love you to tell your 8th graders that gender ideology is a cult, and for them not to join that cult. Anyway, wow, we really need to move on. What a wonderful conversation this sparked.
I know.
I love it. Okay, any opportunity I can to talk about love of country.
Teacher haters. We love teachers, good teachers.
Yeah, we just don't hear about it enough.
We're just not hearing about those ones as often.
All right, coming up next, Amazon is being accused of doing the dirty work of the White House and suppressing books from their search engine about COVID-19, particularly books that didn't look too kindly on the government's response in the vaccine. We'll talk about that coming up next. First, as we discuss rates and where they're at, which impacts every single American, it has a huge impact on the housing market. If you've been waiting to sell your home and just thinking, well, I want rates to go down, so there's a bunch of, all the pent-up demand comes out, I get a higher price for my home, you're probably pretty disappointed last week when the Fed kept rates steady. Wes Jones with sellwithwes.com says it will help the real estate market tremendously if the Fed does follow through on some rate cuts. Where do you think interest rates need to be at to really get the market back up and humming again?
I think if we get into the high 5s, that is going to be a real breakthrough. When we were at 7 and now into the high 6s, that brought in another section of buyers. And if we get that into the low 6s or high 5s, I think things will really start to move again. And, we're already seeing multiple offers in a lot of different price points and, different cities. It's going to make housing more affordable, and it's going to bring more buyers out into the market again. What's that going to do? It's going to push the prices back up. So one of the things that I do see happening, or could see happening in 2024, is all of the gains that we lost in 2022. I think there's a really good chance we make those up in 2024.
Yeah. So of course, though, that is if these Fed cuts that they forecasted manifest. In the meantime, if you're thinking about selling your home this year, get in touch with Wes Jones. Sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. Make sure your home is ready to hit the market. When that happens, you want to take advantage of that pent-up buyer demand. Sellwithwes.com, ask about their listing boost concierge service. And also, while you're there, start by simply using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, we're going to talk about COVID-19 censorship, which was clearly alive and well like mid-2020 to 2023. Although, if you look right now, Nicole, on our live stream on YouTube, right now, in the description of today's episode, we had a little blurb about how Amazon was suppressing COVID-19 books.
Yep.
And what did YouTube do? As soon as we went live on YouTube, they put a little warning on this episode before we've even said anything, before they even know how we're going to cover it. It says COVID-19, get the latest information from the CDC about COVID-19. And they do that on anything that mentions COVID, whether it's me or something else, they're going to put that. But it bothers me because it seems like off the bat, like I'm going to get on here and spew lies about COVID as if the CDC wasn't like the number one liar about COVID-19 and the vaccines. Well, now my video is going to be taken down. But also, it did this the other day when we talked about January 6th, which I've been always critical about January 6th. I haven't been a denier about the seriousness of that day. And it put a little thing on there saying, learn about the January 6th, whatever. And I'm like, you people. Anyway, YouTube's bumming me out today. And you know who else is bumming me out today? An entity I typically come to the defense of, our friends at Amazon. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boo. I feel like that was more appropriate. Can I get the unbelievable open again?
Oh, geez.
Boo. Amazon allegedly censored COVID books under pressure from the White House. Sounds like a familiar tale. Man, Amazon, I always come to your defense. Why you do me like this? I'm always, coming to your defense against unreasonable attacks from the crazy left, and then you got to go turn around and do something like this. So the New York Post reported on this, but this information was actually sent out by Congressman Jim Jordan, who says that they're planning to hold some hearings about this because he had, in this long Twitter thread, sent out some emails that he obtained. The New York Post reported on it, the headline, Amazon censored COVID-19 vaccine books after feeling pressure from the Biden White House. According to docs, it says Amazon officials initially balked at performing a, quote, manual intervention to remove certain book titles from appearing, arguing that it would be, quote, too visible and lead to further scrutiny. The emails state that a tweak to the bookseller's website that would redirect more customers searching certain keywords to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website was in the works, and that a screenshot of that change should be sent to the White House. But it warned employees to play coy with the Biden administration about potential further actions. So Amazon starts out, I think, in an okay space. And I'm going to go through the emails in a moment, but they get contacted by the White House, and then internally at Amazon, they're sort of like, are they like asking us to essentially ban books or take things down? And they seem very caught off guard with it, which I think is the appropriate response. You're a private company. The White House emailing you and telling you how to run your business and how to do something should be setting off alarm bells galore. And then Amazon sort of moves into this, according to these documents, moves into this place where it's like, well, we could do that, but it would be too noticeable. Not, we could do that, but it would be the wrong thing to do. And then they capitulate to what the White House wants. So let's go through a couple of these emails that, again, were shared by Congressman Jim Jordan to X. He posted emails there between Amazon employees and Andrew Slavitt, who was at the time a senior advisor on the White House's COVID-19 response team. So it starts out, this is March 2nd, 2021, and you've got, again, the senior advisor on the White House's COVID-19 response team emailing Amazon, and there's some names blacked out in emails. We did not do that. I believe that was either Jim Jordan or the way the documents came to Congress. So Andrew says in this email, who can we talk to about the high levels of propaganda and misinformation and disinformation of Amazon? That's a bold email. I really want to know who he's sending that to specifically. Like, is that a Jeff Bezos email? Like, who can we talk to? Because it's 2021. Had Jeff Bezos left Amazon yet? Nicole, will you Google that? I think he had not yet. I think that had not been announced. Will you check that? I think it was after that. Who can we talk to about the high levels of propaganda and misinformation and disinformation of Amazon? Man, you have some cojones, Andrew Slavitt. July 5th, 2021. Yeah, so after this. So this is still happening under Andy Jassy, you're off the hook. This is still happening under Jeff Bezos. So second email, the subject line, pre-brief for meeting with the White House. So it's clear that Amazon, as a result of this, schedules a meeting with the White House. This is from an Amazon employee, name redacted. Hi all, here are the notes for our pre-brief discussion with the White House today. And one of the notes says, top talking points to be made affirmatively. Is the administration asking us to remove books, or are they more concerned about search results, or both? So they're trying to kind of figure out questions they're going to ask the White House, which I think that that's an appropriate question. Hey, you guys trying to get us to take books down and not sell them? Or you want us to make sure that they don't show up as high in the search results? So this is when Amazon's trying to understand what is being asked of them, if anything, by the White House. So then this just sort of progresses from there. So here's another email. This one is March 2nd, 2021. So this is still going around. And so when Amazon is sort of asking what exactly the White House wants, this Andrew Slavitt with the White House says, if you search for vaccines under books, I see what comes up. I haven't looked beyond that, but if that's what's on the surface, it's concerning. Happy to get briefed, but want to understand the data when we do. And he says he's roping someone else in. And so it's the contention of the White House that when you go searching vaccines for books, they're not happy with the books that are popping up as the search result comes in. All right, let's continue with Amazon. So Amazon internally is expressing concern about some upcoming media coverage of this issue. My guess is someone at the White House tipped off BuzzFeed and it's like, hey, look, have you checked out what comes up when you search those books in Amazon? So this is an email between people at Amazon. Their names are all blacked out. It says, heads up that we anticipate BuzzFeed will run a negative story looking at COVID-19 related books for sale on Amazon. This story touches on many of the points we've seen raised over the last year, and I worked closely with Cece's team for the points related to search, reviews, and personalization. Related to this topic, the books team has a meeting on March 19th to take a closer look at books related to vaccine misinformation and debating additional steps Amazon might want to take to reduce the visibility of these titles. The book's content risk management team is still working on their doc for the 319 meeting, but I would be happy to share a non-final draft if you're interested. And then it goes on to say, PP is feeling pressure from the White House task force on this issue as well. So you see how Amazon is slowly concerned about, okay, the White House wants us to do this, but what do they really want? And then how they say, we're feeling pressure on this. Oh, now there might be a negative news story. So what are we going to do? Well, Amazon eventually caves, according to Representative Jim Jordan and the New York Post. The article goes on to say, the pressure applied by the Biden administration apparently worked, as the company put, quote, anti-vax books under a, quote, do not promote order the same day Amazon officials met with the White House. Quote, this is from an email between Amazon employees. As a reminder, we did enable do not promote for anti-vax books whose primary purpose is to persuade readers vaccines are unsafe or ineffective on March 9th, and will review additional handling options for these books. Jordan, who chairs the House Judiciary Committee and Weaponization Subcommittee, revealed that both panels will investigate the alleged censorship effort. And my whole issue with this is to see the trajectory of Amazon changing course. Now, I think as a private company, you get to decide for yourself what is appropriate. If as a private company internally, you think, hey, there are some books on our website that we think are disinformation and we're going to choose to either suppress them or take them off, that's fine. Do that and own the potential consequences of doing that as a private enterprise. The issue I have with the way this is dealt with is it didn't seem to me in reading the emails that this was Amazon internally coming to some recognition that the White House was right. that, hey, the White House is raising legitimate concerns. We think that we should do this, not because the White House is telling us to do this or because BuzzFeed is going to come out with some horrible story, but because we believe it's the right thing to do. Now, if that had been the case, I would disagree with Amazon, but I think they came there based on their beliefs as a company and what they want to put forth to the American people and people around the world, and that's fine. But it very much feels like, in reading through these emails, that they gave into pressure from the Biden White House. And when you are as powerful an entity as Amazon, or if it's Facebook or X or whatever it is, and you are actively allowing a political entity, the White House, the government, to dictate what you do, and it's going to have an effect on millions of people, man, that's something that you absolutely deserve to be criticized for. Unbelievable. Okay, we're going to quickly dip outside of Washington State on the migrant issue and head over to Chicago. First, Dave Taylor with First Mark Insurance. He's been talking to us a lot about some of the challenges that people are going through in the insurance industry right now. If you are managing your own insurance plans and you're like, oh, on the big box website and all this stuff, and you've had them for a while, right now, you have so many people who are filing little claims and getting dropped from their carriers that they've been with for years. And sometimes they don't even file a claim. Like, you might have a Kia or a Hyundai, and they decide that you're not worth the risk for them. And if you do not have an insurance broker like First Mark Insurance in your corner, you are left navigating that situation by yourself and trying to find a replacement for insurance, which is probably going to be a higher price, not as good of a product. So Dave Taylor, again, the CEO of First Mark.
We could have a client come to us today that maybe just had a comp loss, so like a windshield loss. Sure. Right? Just a little ding in your windshield. And they come in and we don't have a carrier that will take them.
For a ding in their windshield.
Right, for a ding in the windshield, right? And this is changing, right? So we have some carriers that are starting to loosen up already, but I'm just saying there's never been a better time to be a broker because you need multiple carriers to find solutions for your clients these days. You can't just have one carrier because they might not want your client.
Yeah, and why would you not have an insurance broker in your corner when you're not going to pay them anything? Dave Taylor says he still has people call and they want to do the First Mark Challenge, and they still ask, how much is this going to cost me to have First Mark do this for me? Nothing. It costs you nothing. And that's why I've said it's such a no-brainer to have a team like First Mark, local company. You're not going to call some phone tree. What did he say? We were talking to Dave. A local human being is going to pick up the phone when you have an issue with your insurance at First Mark, and they're going to talk you through it. So firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. Take the First Mark Challenge today. The very best part is they work for you, not the insurance companies. Dipping outside of Washington State on the migrant issue, just like we're having a problem here, Chicago is also having a problem. They have this uber progressive mayor who's learning real quick that progressive policies have consequences. Apparently he wasn't ready for those consequences. He had the most bizarre statement about this. So he's under some pressure, to try to deal with this influx of migrants. Here's what he had to say in making an excuse for why, he's not dealing with this in a more timely fashion.
I have children who attend schools who have soccer games, y'all. You all are asking me as if I'm not a parent in this city. I get it. I'm mayor. I get it. But you're asking me to give you a date, and I have to court. Do you understand that you have not had a mayor like me? I get that. I have a wife. I have children. They have schedules. And plus, we still have public safety that we have to address. We still have the unhoused that we have to address. I still have a budget that I have to address. And I'm doing all of that with a black wife raising 3 black children on the west side of the city of Chicago. I am going to the border as soon as possible.
What? So there's so many things to dissect there. So they're like, why aren't you going to the border? He's like, I have stuff to do. I got to take my kids to soccer games. You asked for this job. You asked to be elected the mayor of one of the biggest cities in the country with some of the most profound challenges in the country. If you weren't up for the task, or if you didn't realize that, doing that job is going to mean that my family life, unfortunately, is going to take a little bit of a hit because I've asked for this responsibility from millions of people, then I just don't think that elected office is that you quite understand the aspect of being a public servant. And then for him to say, you've never had a mayor quite like me, the first thing Nicole said when she heard that, the last mayor was a lesbian. Right. So he's saying, I have a wife and kids. So are you saying because you've never had a mayor like me because the last mayor was a lesbian? And I don't understand, but that's the first thing. It's
she didn't have Well,
I don't know if she had kids, but it's like
know.
he's acting like he's this like traditional family man. It's like, was that a blow at the former mayor? It was so weird. I didn't understand it. And then after he already says that he's got a wife and kids and all this stuff, and I can't give you a timeline for when I'm going to visit the border. Then he says, I have a black wife and 3 black kids. And then the crowd's like, woo! I was like,
the woo for anything. He didn't get that
race?
reaction the first time because he said, I have a family, I have kids, and nobody said no applause or anything like that. And then so he says black kids, and so then everybody's like, woo!
Yeah, so is it like more difficult or time consuming to have a black wife and black kids? Like I'm very,
Yeah.
I was like, this guy,
insane.
he's even maybe worse than Lightfoot. I don't know if you can get worse, but Chicago, I'm just like, it was such a great city at one point. So he'll get to the border after he deals with his real burdensome family issues.
For the soccer game.
Just crazy. Okay, questions and comments from the live stream. Although I do want to start with, well, now let's save the daily subscriber show poll for after some questions and comments. So Nicole's cat on the mice and cookies reference. Nicole's cat says, "I have a delicious mice cookie recipe if anyone wants it." Yeah. Immigrants.
Brandi was saying yesterday that she likes the snarkiness of Nicole's cat.
I want to know who's behind the
is.
account Nicole's cat. I really feel like it's Matt Gilbert. That's my opinion. On the immigrants and the migrant crisis, Kenneth Rauch says, Brandi, I like your opinion about the mouse and the cookie, but I prefer the view to remove the sugar bowl. I don't get it.
He goes on.
Oh, if you have an ant colony problem, there's an enter. It was a space. If you have an ant colony problem and they're getting into the sugar bowl, removing it eliminates the problem. Yeah? Keep that sugar bowl away. Man, if I had a sugar bowl in front of me, I'd be in the sugar bowl too. I don't know. It's not just an ant thing. I'm just trying to say,
okay.
I like sugar, okay? I don't know. You know, can we just start this over? This isn't going well. Migrants. Travis Eberly, I'm disappointed that Brandi is using the language of fringe activists. Unhoused makes it sound like housing is the problem. I would imagine in many cases the person who's responsible for the situation. Have you never watched the show, Travis? And I think I actually said unhoused. Oh, you hear my stomach growl?
I did actually.
Wow.
It takes a lot for me to hear it. Yeah.
Unhoused is like a sarcasm thing because I think it's stupid. And I've said millions of times on this show that housing is not the problem. So that was sarcasm. Bill Biz with a $20 super chat. Brandi, do you believe that illegal immigration is also supported by large agricultural interests in the state? No, I don't. I have spoken to the Farm Bureau. I have been out to visit some of our farms in eastern and central Washington. And they do want more migrant workers, but they want that to be done through a legal path that makes it easier for people to come here on work visas and more of them. So I've never heard anyone in ag talking about, oh, you know, we want more illegal immigration so they can work in our fields, but they do talk about permits and trying to, again, it goes back to that, we want people to be able to come here more easily through legal means, and that is a challenge, right? So, yeah, I don't think that's part of it that I know of. Boo Boo Bear says, Brandi, you sound like a MAGA American first. Too much sense. Matthew Cook, Brandi, do you think at some point organizations might file lawsuits against cities and states that are funding programs for illegals with taxpayer funds? Is there a legal expert that could speak on it? That's an interesting concept. Is if you're, for instance, I think the example of the, I think it's both. Was it New Hampshire that the community center, it wasn't New York. I said New York earlier, but I think it was like maybe New Hampshire. Or in New York where it's like, okay, my child goes to that school. I pay for that school with taxpayer dollars. So then you have a direct tie, right? You can say that you have direct harm through that action by the government, the same with the community center that is paid for with taxpayer funds. Right. So I think if there were an example like that, where if not for that funding or if not for that action, I would have this, or you took this from me. So something like that, I don't see why you couldn't prove a case and prove harm in that instance. But I think it'd have to be specific. It's not enough just to say they gave, you know, $340 million in taxpayer funds, and technically, you know, I'm a taxpayer, so maybe a 100th of a cent of that was mine. And how do you prove that? Tom Nelson on that interview. Sally S. says, breaching the dams takes away hydropower, irrigation for farmers, and river transportation for wheat and grains. And Tom talked about all of that. And he does say that he's not blind to those issues. And he talks through them. And I think his whole point is, yes, it would improve salmon. Of course, if you breach the Snake River dams, he says it would improve salmon runs, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other issues associated with it. And can you, like this lawmaker from Idaho, he says he's come up with a plan that would help address all of those negative implications, but it would cost a lot of money. And so it's deciding, is it worth it? On the teacher, Mr. Hansen, old sub sailor, says this state could use about 2,000 teachers like this guy. I agree. Carlene Heath says, thank you so much, Mr. Hansen. You are making a difference. Kyle T says, my favorite part of this is that I have no idea what this guy's politics are. Could be just about anywhere on the political spectrum, but doesn't make that the purpose of his job. I agree as well. Oh, and then I swore. It's been a while. Old sub sailor gave me $10 for the swear jar donation. So did Son Miller. So since a swear, so that's 20. So that makes up for it. Nice. Thanks, guys.
I don't know that you should get off the hook because other people pay it. I think that's just a nice match.
Well, yeah, but ultimately that money goes into the business account. So technically,
I think you should match it. Like these people are matching your.
Oh, so you're saying
you still should submit.
Okay. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, we need our charity, so we need people
working on it. We're working on it. Yeah.
Submit their charities.
Before we get to our sanity check, Jeremy Sorensen says, I'll be raising my red solo cup tonight. R.I.P. Toby Keith. This is the first thing Nicole told me when I got in today, that Toby Keith died last night.
I know. How sad is that?
That's super sad.
I have this
Who's calling you
throwback.
right now?
It's our guest that's going to be here in a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But hang on.
Show's running a little late.
Let me go to this because, Toby Keith, I'm a big
How
fan.
did he die?
So he had stomach cancer. He's been battling it for a while. So he was a big guy. He was a very big guy, and he had been very small lately. He was very skin and bones lately, but he did a Vegas run a month ago. It was like the last week of December. No, the tickets were insane because I think it was kind of his last thing.
Before,
I've seen him many times. Look at this guy. Oh, look at little Nicole.
Oh my gosh, look at you.
Yeah,
that's you?
Yeah, I know.
In the upper right? That doesn't even look like you. Not in a good or bad way. I'm just saying from here, I'm squinting, but.
Like 15 years ago, something like that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
15
crazy.
years ago. So you were like 10 years
20s.
old.
That's right.
See what I did there? There it is.
Thank you.
Okay,
But anyway, he was such a good guy and so sad.
That's very sad. So yes, pour one out for Toby Keith. Before we get to our closing sanity check, I want to go into it with our daily subscriber show poll because it's relevant. I asked you guys on Patreon, Locals, and X, how important do you believe standardized test scores are in gauging a student's likelihood to succeed? Very important, somewhat important, or not important at all. You guys are pretty split on this, but a lot of you think it's somewhat important, which I think is kind of where I stand. I think there are other aspects, and it depends on what your definition of success is. But I also think that standardized tests, being able to learn and absorb information, it does speak to, a commitment to hard work and your ability, again, to retain information and to learn. Let's see. Captain Cranky Pants says, the test scores are not a reflection of the students as much as they are a reflection of the school's ability to educate. Dang, that's a good point. Heidi Ryan says, if a student can read, they have potential. Unfortunately, testing only shows more failures than successes. Cynthia, my son hated school, didn't do well, didn't go to college, was very personable, highly motivated, and is a general manager of a company. Potential does not depend on test scores. Y says, I voted very important. I know standardized tests are not be-all, end-all. However, to succeed in scoring high on these tests require many skills like time management, assessing when you should skip ahead, and knowledge and application of that knowledge. I think kids who score high generally succeed in life. Again, it is not everything and should not be everything, but it is an important tool to assess students, I believe. And I think that Captain Cranky Pants really has it there, that it's not as much a reflection of the students as it is a reflection of the school's ability to teach students in a way that would help them pass these standardized tests. So with that, I want to get to our closing sanity check for today. So we've talked a lot about this sort of DEI efforts where it's like, oh, we can't fail kids. Oh, you got to pass them on a pass, like a 50% is the lowest that you can give a kid. How could you fail a kid who shows up? And how that's a really not only dangerous way of thinking, but it also is the soft bigotry of low expectations where you're saying that, oh, we think that the kids of color aren't going to do well on standardized tests, so let's just kind of get rid of those or put less importance on those, and we think that that's going to somehow help kids. Well, according to Campus Reform, a new A report from Campus Reform, Dartmouth College becomes the first Ivy League to reinstate the SAT-ACT requirement because they actually found that it increases, not only does it increase and improve outcomes, but it increases diversity. Again, from Campus Reform, the headline, Dartmouth becomes first in Ivy League to reinstate SAT-ACT requirement, says research finds it increases diversity. The article reads, their illuminating study found that high school grades paired with standardized testing are the most reliable indicators for success in Dartmouth's course of study. I can never say Dartmouth. Dartmouth's course of study. They also found that test scores represent an especially valuable tool to identify high-achieving applicants from low and middle-income backgrounds who are first-generation college-bound, as well as students from urban and rural backgrounds. The update went on to assert that, quote, contrary to what some have perceived, standardized testing allows us to admit a broader and more diverse range of students. And I can see that because if you can perform well on a test and you can learn and absorb the education and the skills when it comes to the prep for those tests, you don't have to be like a rich white kid to be able to do that. And so when you can have someone who is from a poor background, or let's say that they are from a BIPOC community, and they perform well on a test, you might not have identified that student if not for, because let's say that kid didn't have that standardized test program and they were from a poor family, and their family member is like, well, I don't know if we can afford to get you into that college, but if you can take that standardized test and do well on it, and that's how the college notices you, then that's an entry into furthering your education. And so I think that this is an important step for at least one of the Ivy League schools. But the idea that standardized tests don't have any bearing at all on what a kid's success would be like in college, I think is pretty absurd. All right, Nicole, anything I'm missing?
Nope.
I love how that was on education and I was having trouble reading it.
Everybody has
It was
trouble
really
with Dartmouth.
small on here.
Dartmouth.
I promise I can read. Is it Dartmouth or Dartmouth?
Dartmouth.
Dartmouth. Really strong end to the show
I don't even know
guys.
if that's entirely correct. I know it's not mouth, though.
Is someone correcting me on the live chat? Anyway, we got to go.
Yep.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving Common Sense a comeback. If you have not subscribed to support our show already, please do so. You can sign up at undividedpod.com. That's undividedpod.com. And I will brush up on my reading between today and tomorrow. Farewell.